Well, welcome back. I got my pilot uniform on today because we are going to be talking about some airplane things. You may have noticed that in the news recently, just even over the past couple years, the aviation industry has been in the news quite a bit in an uncomfortable amount for some people. Today, we're not quite going to dig into the more recent events because they are still ongoing investigations, but we're pretty much going to be talking about what to do during an emergency, primarily an emergency evacuation. So if there are any nervous flyers or people who are uncomfortable with aviation and uncomfortable with flying or anything, just be warned, we are going to be talking about some airplane accidents. Some of them do have fatalities, some of them everybody walks away safely. But if you are curious about learning something about aviation and primarily how to keep you and your family safe during an emergency evacuation, stay tuned. First off, if you like what you see in this video and you want to share with anybody else who has nervous or reservations about flying, this might be a good video to share it to them. This also might be a terrible video to share with them because, like I said, we are going to be talking about some aviation accidents. The ones that have happened in the more recent years, some of them were mid-air, some of them happen on the ground, but almost always involves an evacuation once the airplane gets on the ground. And to do that safely, it is very important that you follow the guidelines laid out by the aviation industry. You listen to the flight attendants, which is something that we are going to dig into, and some of the roles that are involved with the different crew members and what their responsibilities are for an aircraft incident or an aircraft accident. So beginning of this 2-week work shift, I did start off with a week of my annual Recurrent training. And for me, the Recurrent training starts with 1 day in ground school, which is where we just sit in the classroom. We talk about different issues that the company's had and safety issues and maybe some kind of, maybe some deficiencies or things that need to be worked on or need to be improved or just need to be refreshed because we don't do them very often. The next 4 days are spent in the simulator. I had 2 days that were kind of like practice days. 3rd day was an evaluation, and the 4th day was also an evaluation of a different variety. So the first 2 days in the simulator are things that we will practice or maneuvers that we will do just to, kind of like knock off the rust because the simulator is a very high workload environment. There was a lot of things that we are required by the FAA to cram into a very small window. We need to practice different maneuvers, making sure we have a good feel for the airplane. We have to practice different procedures and approaches or departures, things that have been challenging or historically, or things that the company has found that the pilots have been deficient in, or maybe some of the pilots just haven't quite grasped the understanding of this specific area, or it's things that we just don't do very often because there are things that we are required to know. And some of those things we do quite often, so we're very familiar with them, we're very comfortable, it's almost muscle memory. But then there are also other things that are a little bit abnormal. We still have to know how to deal with it, we still have to know how to overcome that challenge. But just because it's something that we don't actually do in the real world as often, it can be a little bit rusty. So that is exactly one of the reasons that we go in the simulator and practice these things. Now, for us, day 3 in the simulator, it was pretty challenging because that is where you're going to have, they're called V1 cuts. It's a specific speed on the takeoff roll. Once you hit a certain speed, there's only so much runway left to stop. And if you hit that speed, even if you were to say abort and do everything you can to stop the airplane, it's not guaranteed to stop before the end of the runway. So if a V1 cut is one of those things where an engine fails and we have to continue the takeoff. The airplane has more than enough power to continue the takeoff with only one engine, but it does make things quite difficult. So after we practice that scenario for a few times, we get up, we take off, and other things will happen in the simulator. We had maybe like a landing gear issue, or a door opens in flight, or you have to, or the depressurizes the airplane. Could be a flaps issue, a controls issue, could be a fire. All of these things are some of the things that they throw at us in the simulator because it is a safe training environment. Obviously, this isn't something that you want to practice in the real world. So that's why this is one of the things that we continually repeat and do over and over and over again to make sure that we are going to be as safe as possible if this were to happen in a real life. Now, I said earlier, we're going to be talking about primarily evacuations, because depending on the emergency, you may or may not be able to, as a pilot, you may or may not be able to get the plane off the runway or onto a taxiway or even to the gate. You might have to evacuate on the runway or on the tarmac before you even get to the parking spot. And this is a pretty task-saturated event because I've seen some videos online where the passengers saying, oh, there's a problem, we have to evacuate. You know, why aren't they opening the doors? Why this, that, and whatever? Why is the engine still running? Well, there is a process. You know, if, let's say we have an engine fire on the right side of the plane, we have to shut that engine off. You know, we don't want to have that set at our takeoff power or any power and then have people evacuating right out front or behind or anywhere near a running engine, because that is extremely dangerous in itself. Now, when we have an engine fire on the ground, like I said, we have memory items. It's to shut off the fuel. Maybe we have to deploy the fire retardant, and we have to make sure that the aircraft itself is safe for people to even be around it before you get out of the relative safety of the fuselage. Now, when that happens, the pilots have done what they can to contain the airplane and secure the airplane and made it safe. Then it is the responsibility of the flight attendants to direct passengers to a safe area and exit the airplane safely. This is where a lot of things happen and go wrong because passengers, I've been a passenger too, we've all been a passenger, and passengers aren't always the best at following instructions. That is the flight attendant's job to tell you what to do because they are familiar with the aircraft, they are familiar with the evacuation policies, they are familiar with how to deploy the slides and all the safety equipment and things that are on board the airplane. A lot of people downplay the responsibilities of flight attendants, and I've worked with a lot of flight attendants, I'm related to a lot of flight attendants, and so that does kind of rub me the wrong way then when people just say, oh, they're glorified waitresses or waiters or, you know, up in the air. That is part of their job, but that is not their responsibility. It says, they'll say that in the beginning of the video or their introduction or whatever when they get on the plane, that your safety is our primary responsibility. So to emphasize this point, we're gonna go ahead and take a look at a couple videos. And again, forewarned, these are aircraft accidents. Some of them involve fatalities, some of them don't. The first one is probably gonna be the most intense. It did involve quite a few fatalities. It was a Aeroflot. I'm not quite sure how to say that name actually, but it was an airplane that crashed in Moscow, Russia. I believe they had a lightning strike, which set fire to the airplane while it was in flight. They turned around, they landed the airplane. At this point, it was very much on fire. The aft of the airplane was very much on fire, and they came to a stop and they evacuated on the runway. So you can see the plane skidded to a stop, very much on fire. The aft of the airplane was completely destroyed at the end of it. So you see the doors open. Person. They open up the other door, people coming out that side as well. Running away, great. And eventually the fire trucks show up and start putting out the fire. But we're gonna go ahead and go back to when they first started opening the door, and I'll try and show you what I'm talking about. And when the flight attendants are giving their safety briefing and they say that in event of evacuation, make sure you find your nearest exit, could be in front of you, could be behind you, and it will be illuminated by a glow-in-the-dark track or whatever lighting that they have to find the exit. Obviously with this aircraft, you really don't want to be exiting out the back or over the wings. So your closest exit may not be your physically closest exit, might be the closest safe exit to exit the aircraft. And when these people are getting off and also when they are talking about an emergency evacuation, they say, leave your baggage. Leave your baggage. So we're gonna watch this again, and we're gonna count how many bags come off of this airplane. The further investigation for this particular crash, the baggage was something that was brought up. They did a lot of studies and mock evacuations, and they found that that wasn't the main issue why those people on the rear of the airplane didn't get off of the aircraft. So this is kind of more of an example of just because you think, oh, it'll be real quick, I'll take my bag. Well, it's not. And if everybody says, oh, I'm gonna be really quick, it'll only take a second. Well, you have 100-something people on the plane and everybody takes a second. You're dealing with over a minute, up to 2 minutes delay of people trying to get off the airplane just because they want to take their bag and their phone and their laptop and whatever is with them. Leave your baggage. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and take a look at another video. This is with a Southwest flight. This happened a few years ago where the engine more or less exploded. When that happened, we had what's called a rapid decompression. And a rapid decompression is a critical failure in somewhere in the airframe of the fuselage, and the pressurized cabin suddenly becomes unpressurized. And at high altitudes, that's gonna make the oxygen mask drop from the ceiling because it's very difficult to breathe when there is not a lot of air. I think at cruise, I wanna say that they were at 33,000 feet. You have somewhere between 30 and 60 seconds of useful consciousness. And so for the pilots, we have our oxygen mask and we have to don that in. That is a memory item because there's no time to look up a checklist if you got 30 to 60 seconds before you start to pass out. So this one, the window blew out and it partially sucked a lady out of the aircraft. She did end up passing away. She managed to stay inside of the aircraft, but it's suspected that more shrapnel came and hit her and caused her to lose her life. So now the rapid decompression, if you've seen, I think it's GoldenEye. No, I can't remember the name of the movie. It's a James Bond movie with Sean Connery where he shoots a gun inside the airplane, and he's like, oh, if you shoot this gun, we're all gonna die. And he shoots this little pinhole in the window, and this larger gentleman got sucked out the window. That's Hollywood. That's not going to happen. It's going to be very quick because you were just equalizing the pressure from inside the cabin to outside the cabin. So for here, the point I'm trying to emphasize here is the flight attendants, when they tell you to fasten your seatbelt, and they tell you, we all know it, they say, the captain has turned off the fasten seatbelt sign, feel free to move out the cabin. But when you are in your seat, please keep your seatbelt fastened low and tight around your waist in case there is any event of rough air or turbulence. Well, hey, this seems like pretty rough air, and especially when it's coming from inside the plane going outside the airplane. And I suspect if this lady had her seatbelt on when she was seated, I would imagine that her chances of getting sucked out of the airplane would have been drastically reduced. So I'm guessing she wasn't wearing it. So wear your seatbelt. They tell you wear your seatbelt, even if it's not, even if it's smooth, even if you're not actively landing or taking off, put your seatbelt on when you're sitting there. I almost forgot. Continuing on with this accident, there's been videos and pictures posted of the passengers that were on board of this aircraft, and the oxygen mask is on, and they're wearing them. Got my coffee cup here, and they're wearing them like this. This is not how you're supposed to wear a mask. Deal with it? Because you're supposed to go over your nose and mouth, okay? Like this, nose and mouth. Otherwise, you might as well not even wear it, because you're just covering one air hole. So they will say in the demonstration, they literally show you how to put it on. You put it over your nose and mouth, you pull the strings, tighten it, and it's gonna start to supply a flow of oxygen. The last video we're gonna watch It's probably something that you've been familiar with. You've probably seen it before. It happened fairly recently. It was an Alaska Airlines flight that was taking off from Portland, I think. It happened on takeoff, so they were still at a relatively low altitude. And that's when the door blew off of the side of the airplane. Now, there's a lot of things that have to do with this one, because this door isn't really a door. It's an option from Boeing, basically. So this door, it was a weak point in the structure of the airplane, and it departed the airplane when it began to pressurize, because once the pressure starts to build up in the inside of the airplane, it puts a lot of external pressure trying to force the air out. So this one happened on departure. There was, I think it's a teenager who got his shirt sucked off or something. I'm not quite sure how that happens, but I'll guarantee you he probably had his seatbelt on, because he didn't get sucked out of the airplane with it like the unfortunate passenger on the Southwest Airlines flight did. So again, the flight attendants tell you to wear the seatbelt. There's a sign that says wear a seatbelt. Captain, pilots, whoever are going to tell you to wear a seatbelt, so you should probably put on your seatbelt. There's actually one more aircraft incident that I wanted to talk about. It was the Miracle on the Hudson. I'm sure we're all very familiar with this. The plane was departing from an airport in New York, hit a bunch of geese, lost both the engines at a very low altitude, and Captain Sully didn't have enough time to turn it back to the airport, so he elected to ditch the airplane in the Hudson River. Now you will see a lot of the pictures. I'm just going to show pictures here because the videos that I've found are pretty grainy and they don't really show the point I'm trying to make. But this airplane is landing in the water. Okay, I'm sure the flight attendant said that, hey, we're going to ditch. I'm sure Captain Sully said that we're going to be landing in the water. I'm sure you could look out the window and say, that's not an airport, that's water. And as these people were coming in, and as they touched down on water, all these people started to evacuate the airplane. They got onto the slides, which double as rafts. They're stepping out onto the wing. Look at all these people in these pictures. I'm sorry it's grainy. This is what I could find. I'm not seeing any life jackets. No, during the passenger briefing, the flight attendants, they show you how to put on a life jacket. It's under your seat. You can use your seat cushion as a flotation device. Put it overhead, strap the thing around, yank on the cords after you exit the airplane. You don't want to pull those strings as you're still in the cabin, because those things, I've worn them before, they inflate very quickly and they inflate a lot, and so it takes up a lot of room. It's really scrunched up against your neck, so I mean it's kind of hard to move around and breathe and whatever. But the point I'm trying to make is stay calm, leave your bag, take a life jacket if you need to. If your phone is in your pocket, great. If it's not, get out of there. So for this video, I decided to go ahead and do something that I had never done before on this channel. Is we're going to go ahead and talk to a flight attendant and see what it is. So I talked about recurrent for a pilot a little bit. So we're going to go ahead and talk to a flight attendant and see what are some of the things that they have to do for their recurrent training. And so I did the only thing I could think of, and I called up the best flight attendant that I know. Hey, Dad.
Well, unfortunately, I'm an idiot, and the audio didn't capture for this conversation, so I'll summarize. If you didn't know, my dad has been a flight attendant for nearly 25 years, starting in early 2000. This career change did have a big influence on me wanting to be a pilot when I grew up. Having just completed his own recurrent training just a month prior, I decided to ask him to give a brief overview on what is involved in his recurrent training. His training takes place over 2 days. It involves a written test covering different areas such as safety and security procedures, the location and use of emergency and medical equipment. They're also given a refresher course on involving drills covering the usage of the various equipment, providing medical assistance, including CPR and the use of an onboard AED. And of course, emergency evacuations, both on land and in the water, sometimes involving performing these drills in an actual pool. When asked how much training is involved in pouring drinks and serving snacks, he laughed and said, absolutely none. Those skills are learned and fine-tuned on the job, and the primary focus on recurrent training is safety and security. When I asked him what happens if you're unable to pass the test in recurrent training, he said that you're given a few chances and possibly some additional training to bring you up to standard. But at the end of the day, if you're unable to perform your primary function, then you may no longer have a job at the company. Towards the end, I asked him what message he would like to share to the everyday passenger, and he said, wear your seatbelt, review the safety briefing card, and above all, be respectful to other passengers and your crew members. And just to try and alleviate some of the still nervous flyers out there, here's some information taken from the IATA Annual Safety Report for 2024. According to their 2024 Annual Safety Report for the airlines that they represent, IATA reported nearly 40.6 million flights. There were a total of 46 accidents, 7 of those involved fatalities, for a total of 244 fatalities. And these numbers are always improving. A decade ago, the 5-year average from 2011 to 2015 was 1 accident for every 456,000 flights. Today, the 5-year average for 2020 to 2024 is 1 accident for every 810,000 flights. So yes, traveling by air is still very safe.
All right, thanks, Dad. I'll talk to you later. All right, bye. Well, there you have it. Straight from the flight attendant's mouth. Buckle up, read your safety cards. Be nice to your flight attendants. They're there to keep you safe. They're not just there to serve you drinks and help you have a good time. Obviously, having a good time is a plus for everybody, but they are primarily there for your safety. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
There's really nothing to worry about, Mary. Statistically, they say you're more likely to get killed on the way to the airport. In a head-on crash or flying off a cliff or getting trapped under a gas truck. That's the worst. I have this cousin. Well, I have this cousin.
Lloyd, could you keep your eyes on the road, please?
Oh, yeah. Good thinking. Can't be too careful.